Today we're going to be replacing the front brakes, the front rotors and brake pads on a 2015 Mazda CX-9 TB. Your car should look the same as this. These are the parts that I've gone with. Rotor number 1, rotor number 2, and then you get all your brake pads in this box here. Part number for this product is as shown, and they're a GP Max. I live in Brisbane and I got these parts from Slacks Creek Brake and Clutch. It was a really good value. I've unpacked them. There are your brake pads. They appear to be exactly the same on each side of the rotor. And here are my rotors. Slacks Creek Brake and Clutch sold them to me for $225, which was better than the online price. And one of the guys there is an ex-Mazda technician, so he was really helpful with some questions. So just some basic tools. I'm going to use some ring spanners to undo my pins, and you'll see there's some wire. I'm using coat hanger wire because the brake caliper piece is going to come off completely, and we do not want to suspend that by the actual brake line. You've got to secure that. Alright, let's get into it. And there's my brace. I've just inserted on their ends 2 pavers to go under the bar of that jack. Never trust a hydraulic jack. So I'm not going to let it down and rest on it. It's just there as a safety guard. You could use blocks of wood, but again, if you've got car stands and you're always going to do this, go get yourself a pair. Okay, as I bring that top bolt out, I'm absolutely supporting this because you can see the brake line is absolutely attached to the back of this. And you can see up there that I've got my wire ready to go, and it's fixed to the lowest point that it's going to run. Okay, you don't want to fix it over here and then have it slip down to there. Okay, so I'm just gently at this stage, just taking it real easy. And it's not real easy with one hand on the camera. Okay, with my caliper, let's call it that, suspended safely, let's talk about that for a bit. See how I'm just being very careful. All I did was turn it around upon itself. Now these pistons here, I'm actually going to just get a block of wood and I'm just going to carefully with even force push them back in. And you can do it. Just be patient and take your time with it. They're meant to be pushed back in. That's part of the resetting process. What you do not want at this stage of the game is to have kids in the car who are going to push their foot onto the brake pedal. If they did that right now, these pistons would pop out and all of your brake fluid would come pouring out and you'd have to start with your bleeding and all that. And that's way beyond me. So keep the kids out of the car. While you have the chance, straight away push these pistons back in, and if you can just chop the wood in here until you need this thing back, I would recommend that you do it. You can use C-shaped clamps to do this. I have my own method, which I'm not going to share with you because quite frankly I don't need the criticism. In regard to your bolts that you took out, you'll see that the top one here is different from the bottom one. We're going to grease those up when we put them back in, especially with all the brake pad joints and everything. We'll grease that up. But what you want to do is move these bolts away from where you're working and even just sort of like cover them up, because you don't want all the grit and everything that you're pulling out from your brake pad to end up on them. These are brake pads. They're going to come out quite easily now. So I'm just going to go get a screwdriver and just get into here and just evenly pull them out. It doesn't matter about the rotor because I'm replacing that anyway. You've got one on this side as well. Now I apologise for the crappy light, but what you've got is some little metal clips, top and bottom. Be careful with those because there's not a lot in the pack and I think we need to reuse them. And of course, just be careful with your little rubber boots here. You don't want to go knocking them around either. Here are my brake pads. They've come off in the order. Now, this is interesting because the one on the outside has actually got quite a few mil left. The one on the inside of the rotor has nothing. It's metal on metal, which is what I was feeling coming through. So the reason I mention this is, if you really want to see what the wear is on your brake pads, you really need to stick your head around to the other side of the disc and see what's happening with that inner brake pad, because that's the one that could be actually making all the noise. Alright, I've got my other ones down here. I've got them on cloth and I'm going to protect those surfaces and make sure that those surfaces are clean before they go against the rotor. What we will be doing is we will be preserving these clips here. We want to make sure that they're okay, and I'm actually going to be greasing those up with this grease lubricant. I'm going to grease into here, and I'm going to grease also into here. What I'll also be doing is I'm going to use the old brake pad to show you the footprint. I'm going to grease where the pistons hit the brake pads, because that'll get rid of squeak, and then you do want movement, but what you don't want is any of this grease obviously on your rotor. Taken the old rotor off, and I've just laid it on top of the other one just to make sure I have bought the correct part, and I have. But have a look at this. I mean, this is the scoring. That's how bad that inner pad was. We'd actually got to a point where we stopped driving the car. So no, I did not use this car to go pick up my parts. Alright, I'm going to put the new rotor on, and then we'll put everything back. New rotor is placed on. Okay, you can see that I've greased up some of that, one half only. That's intentional, because I have access to the outside, and I just don't want to deal with grease while I'm putting this back together. But that's basically going to go into there, and then I can grease those other ones, as I've said. So they're ready to go, but this is really important. When you open the box of the brake pad, you are going to find two of these guys. Then you're going to instantly, if you're like me, think, well, hang on, I've got 4 brake pads. What the heck's going on? Well, because you paid attention when you took your brake pad off, this is the inner one, okay? That's in there, like that, pressing up against the rotor. There is one of these for the top, okay, on each side of the car, so you only get 2. Not top and bottom down here, but just the top there. Now, the other thing that you'll find interesting, if you're anything like me, is that it's got a tapered edge. And I instinctively think, oh, tapered edge, it must go that way. But it doesn't. You can see where the pistons are. You can see the curve of the pad. It actually sits like that. So I've gone and mounted mine, ready to go. And that is how it's going to be. Tapered edge pointing to the middle of the car, pointing to the engine. All right, and that should all come together nicely. So next frame should be the caliper housing, is what I'm calling it, back on, and then we'll start putting on the brake pads. Crappy light again, but get this guy in up here first. So get it in, you'll feel that compress. For the inner one this is, and then navigate this guy in down here. Be careful not to deform the thing, but you've got grease on here, you've got grease on there. Slot that one in first. Okay, get that in. Taper toward the engine. Then slide this one, just navigate it in, be patient, and it'll click in eventually. Took me a little bit of time. It was fiddly, and I'm going, oh, I hope I've got the right part, but I did, because I went and laid them over it, the old one, so I knew I did. So that gave me the confidence to just persist. As I say, my videos are for beginners, those who don't have a lot of confidence, so that's why I sort of point out the obvious. Got some grease put in there on this side, ready to go. You have to insert this one and then turn it in. So in, turn, yeah? Just being careful not to get any of this grease on the rotor. We just want that. I put a blob on the end so that when I put this brake pad in, it dragged it in there. And I've got a little bit of a reservoir here at the end of it as well. So there's my brake pads. They're in. Okay. I've put the caliper host back on, nice and tight. Look up on the internet onto the Mazda and find out what your torque settings are for these. I don't want to be advising on that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this guy back onto here so that it's nice and strong when I go to retract those. So despite what I said earlier, I'm actually going to push the pistons back in once it's back on here because it's too much stuffing around, and if you slip, you don't want to be putting any pressure onto this guy over here. Alright, as you can see, I just braced it so that it wouldn't go any further. I don't want to be sitting here and find that it just popped and fluid went everywhere. So that was my safeguard. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. My top pin greased up and ready to go. Notice how I put a little bit of blob on the end, so that way when I insert it, it'll drag it down the shaft of this bolt. So that's my top one. That's going to go in there after I bring that caliper around. I'm going to go stand this on its head, away from all the jiggery pokery that I'm about to do there, so I don't get any crap on it. Alright, so I've got the caliper back on with the bolt in, and I've just wiped away the excess grease, because as I put it in, it obviously pushed grease to the end. Now, it's obviously not going to go in because my pistons are proud. So this is where you push your pistons back, okay? And you can just use some slimline wood to go across that, and then you can actually buy the part that actually pushes it, or as I say, a C-shape clamp, winding clamp will do it. You just got to put it behind here and then push that in. I've got my own method. I'm about to do that now that it's secure on there and there's not, you know, because of the twisting action and all that jazz. Alright, so the next frame should be that those pistons are all back and the caliper has been seated back down on top of my brake pads. But what I will be doing before I put it down is I will be putting grease on the pistons, so that they can move around a little bit as they apply force onto the actual brake pad. Okay, so it's all on. I had to actually obviously push the pistons all the way to the very, very back for them to get on. Now when you lower the caliper onto the housing, watch out for this little boot here, okay? This is going to, because it extends out, it's compressed, that's going to drag it, okay, and you don't want to break it. So what you'll do is you will retract it either with your finger or with a flat screwdriver as you move this thing down, and then you can let go of it. And now I'm greased up with my pin, and I'm now going to put that through. Okay, we're done. So I've torqued these back up, top and bottom. Oh, I've got the dog licking the back of my head. What do you want, supervisor? As soon as you pick up the phone, of course. Make sure you get rid of, clean up, get rid of your piece of wire, okay? And that should all now be good. Go to the internet to make sure you get your torque settings for these. At the beginning of the video, I suppose I should have said that you need a torque wrench. Look, that's up to you. So now it's a matter of doing this for the other side. Another good reason to have car stands. If you're going to have anything valuable sitting underneath your car, you absolutely want to make sure it's secure. Anyway, this video was obviously for beginners and those that lack confidence like me. If this has been helpful, then maybe just shove a like. Ciao.